Hello my friends and welcome back to the channel. We are continuing our series today on choosing a main for Battle for Azeroth. Today we are taking a look at the Feral Druid. We've been taking a look at all the specs that I've been considering for a main spec and a main class, and the Feral Druid is actually the last one. So we're going to be looking at the Feral Druid. If you're new here, we're putting out daily World of Warcraft content heading into Battle for Azeroth. So if you like what you see, consider subscribing. And if this is not your first time with us, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you all here. So we've got the Feral Druid. Not a lot has changed for Feral, going from Legion into BFA. So let's dive right into the spellbook. We'll start with the passives. Feral has a bunch of passives compared to a lot of specs, but most of them are pretty straightforward. So first of all, we've got Flight and Aquatic Form. Those are just telling you, about what your travel form does in different environments that you use it in. Astral Influence, this is actually from a talent that I've taken, so we'll talk about that when we get to the talent tree. Feline Swiftness increases your movement speed by 15%. This is in addition to the movement speed increase you get from cat form, so you can run around super fast as a kitty all day, which is nothing new if you've played Feral before. We've got Feral Instinct, which just reduces the chance that enemies have to detect you while Prowl is active. We've got Infective Wounds. Rake also applies a slow to the target. Your mastery is Razor Claws, which increases your bleed damage by a significant percentage. Omen of Clarity, your auto attacks have a chance to cause a clear casting state, making your next Shred, Thrash, or Brutal Slash, because of a talent, cost no energy. Predatory Swiftness, your finishing moves have a 20% chance per combo point to make your next Regrowth or Entangling Roots instant, free, and castable in all forms. This is pretty much going to be a 100% chance to proc every time because you're going to be using 5 combo point finishers all the time. And then lastly, we've got Primal Fury, which gives you an extra combo point when you crit with a combo point generator. Just to note, it says damage over time cannot trigger this effect. So as an example, the bleed on Rake, if the ticks from the bleed crit, that does not generate a combo point, but that's just, nothing is different from normal there. So let's look at our abilities, our active abilities. Then we've of course got our shapeshifts. We've got bear form and cat form. In travel form, I have Moonkin form in my spellbook right now, just because of the talent that I've taken, the affinity talent. We've got Berserk. This is our default DPS cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown. It reduces the energy cost of all cat form abilities by 40% and increases your maximum energy by 50 for 15 seconds. So this gives you a ton of energy and allows you to really pump in the damage during its window. Brutal Slash is a talent. We'll talk about that on the talent tree. Dash is your sprint. Dreamwalk is your teleport to the lobby for the class order hall, which also has portals to a bunch of other druidic, naturey locations around the world. We've got Entangling Roots, which is your root ability. It does break on damage, so just be aware of that. Feral Frenzy is a talent. We'll talk about that in the talent tree. Ferocious Bite is your direct damage finisher. So of course Feral uses the same system as Rogues, where you have energy that regenerates and combo points, and Ferocious Bite is your big direct damage finisher. We've got Growl, so if you're in bear form you can taunt targets. Hibernate puts Beast or Dragonkin to sleep. You can only use it on one target at a time. That's just a little bit of extra CC. Lunar Strike is here because of a talent, so we'll talk about that in the talent tree. Sorry, druids get a lot of abilities from talents, so there's a lot of those little messages we'll talk about. Maim is your finisher that stuns. It does 1 second per combo point and does a little bit of damage, really insignificant. At 5 points it does 480 damage. Just to give you an idea, the direct damage from Rake is 405 damage. Shred is almost 600 damage in my gear, and a Bite at 5 combo points is 1500 damage in my current gear. So the damage on Maim is really minor. It's all about the stun. Mighty Bash is a talent stun that I have right now. We've got Moonfire, which you can use in cat form if you have a particular talent choice, but I don't have that right now, so if I use it, it'll take me right out. We've got Stealth, Prowl. You've got Rake, which is your combo point generator dot that you will want to keep up on your target at all times. You want to open with this because if you use it when stealthed, it will deal 100% increased damage. That applies both directly and to the direct damage and the damage over time portion of it. And it will also stun your target if it's stunnable for 4 seconds. So really strong opener. Want to make sure you're using Rake to open on targets out of Prowl. Rebirth is battle res. Regrowth is your heal. Remove corruption removes curses and poisons. Revive is your not battle res, so out of combat. Rip is your big finisher that you want to keep 100% uptime on, and you always want to use it at 5 combo points. So it will have a fixed duration of 24 seconds regardless of how many combo points you use, but it'll just deal significantly more damage with each combo point that you use. So you can see going from 4 to 5 is over a 700 damage increase, and that works out to be something like a 20% damage increase. So you always want to make sure that you're using it at full 5 combo points. Shred is your just direct damage generator. It does direct damage. It deals increased damage against bleeding targets, and if you're stealthed, it deals 50% increased damage and has double the chance to crit, but you don't really want to be opening with that because Rake is going to deal a lot more damage and get a lot more out of that bonus that it has from stealth. Skull Bash is your interrupt. Solar Wrath we have because of a talent again. Soothe dispels enraged targets. I don't even have this on my bars currently for Feral, but yeah, Soothe dispels enrage, and I believe Druids are the only class to have this. I don't think Hunters got Trank Shot back. Stampeding Roar is still here. It has a 21-yard range, a little bit shorter than that by default, but it'll give a sprint to your party in raid. Star Surge and Sunfire are talent abilities. Survival Instincts is your defensive. It reduces your damage taken by 50% for 6 seconds and has 2 charges. Thrash is your AoE bleed ability. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but if you are, say you've got 10 mobs up, it's definitely worth getting Thrash up and keeping it on them. And it does award a combo point, so there's that. We've got Tiger's Fury, which is now back off of the global cooldown. This is one of those abilities that was added to the global cooldown that just felt awful on the global cooldown because it restored energy, and when you used it, it made it really almost impossible to not cap your energy, and because it's got a relatively short duration. It's only 10 seconds. So Tiger's Fury is off the global cooldown and feeling really, really fun and good to use. This just gives you energy back and then increases your damage by 15% for its 10-second duration. One thing to note is that it affects the full duration of your dots when you have it up. So if you use Tiger's Fury and then get a Rake and a Rip up, they're going to last longer than the duration of Tiger's Fury, but they will benefit from that damage increase for their entire duration. So you want to make sure that you're keeping this on them as much as you can. Now, obviously, they don't last longer than its cooldown, so you're going to have some periods of time where you don't have them buffed. That's okay. You just want to keep it up. You want to keep that buff on them as much as possible. And then we've got Tribal Form and Wild Charges of Talent, and that concludes our look at the spellbook. So let's take a look at Feral's talents. Tier 15, we've got Blood Scent, which gives you 10% increased crit on your cat form abilities when the target you're attacking is bleeding. Predator, the cooldown on Tiger's Fury resets when a target dies with one of your bleed effects, and Tiger's Fury lasts 4 additional seconds. So this is an incredibly strong talent for either open world content or dungeon content, where you're going to have a lot of targets that you put your bleeds on and then they die, because you'll get a lot of Tiger's Fury resets on that. And just that extra 4 seconds, bringing it up to a 14-second ability, is pretty nice to have as well. We've got Lunar Inspiration. This is the talent that gives you access to Moonfire in cat form. Yeah, that's that. Tier 30, we've got Tiger Dash, which replaces Dash and gives you a super sprint. You can just run around crazy fast. It does diminish over its duration a little bit, but that's there. It does replace your normal dash, but it has a 45-second cooldown. So this is a really strong movement ability. We've got Renewal, which is a minor heal, and then we've got Wild Charge, which for Feral allows you to leap behind the target and daze them for 3 seconds. So honestly, Wild Charge for Feral is really, really strong and always has been. So that might take the cake because you already have a lot of movement speed as Feral. And yeah, being able to leap to your target is really, really nice. Tier 45, we've got Balance Affinity, Guardian Affinity, and Resto Affinity. So Balance gives you Moonkin Form. It also gives you Star Surge, Lunar Strike, Solar Wrath, and Sunfire. Now, one thing to note here is that Moonkin Form from the Affinity has a 1.5 minute cooldown. So if you're in a situation like, let's use a current tier example on Agrimar, right, where you have to run out of range of the boss for a few seconds, what you can do there is just pop into Moonkin Form, and of course I don't have any abilities on my bar, but pop into Moonkin Form, do a little bit of damage before you rush back in, and then Cat Form and get back in. Yeah, so that's there, but then note that it does have a cooldown, so you can't enter back into it, so you can't be, you know, like dumping your energy and then hopping out and doing magic damage and go back and forth. That's not the intent of the affinities. It's just there to give you situational use for these. Guardian Affinity gives you Thick Hide, which reduces all damage taken by 6%. All right, the passive for Balance Affinity is Astral Influence, which increases the range in your abilities by 3 yards. This is down a little bit from live, but it allows you to sit pretty far away from targets and still melee them. I mean, look at how far away I am, and I'm still hitting him with melee attacks. That's a little bit silly, but that's there. So Guardian gives you 6% damage, and then Resto gives you that healing effect from Ysera's Gift, 3% of your max health every 5 seconds. If you're at full health, it instead heals a party or raid member. Tier 60, we've got Crowd Control. We've got Mighty Bash, which is a 5-second stun on a 50-second cooldown. We've got Mass Entanglement, which is a AoE root. So that could be useful in some scenarios. And then we've got Typhoon, which is your knockback and Daze. So that's also really useful in some scenarios. Tier 75, Soul of the Forest gives you 5 energy per combo point spent, and your finishing moves deal 5% increased damage. Jagged Wounds reduces the duration of your Rip, Rake, and Thrash, but that increases their damage per second quite significantly. And then we've got Incarnation, which buffs your Berserk. So it gives you an improved Cat Form that allows you use of Prowl, Well, and Stealth once. So you get a little bit of, you get a vanish there where you can take advantage of that and get another 100% increased damage Rake on the target. Causes Shred and Rake to deal damage as if Stealth were active. So you don't even need that Stealth, but you can use it right at the end if you want to get it in. Or you can just use it to escape from combat, however you want to use that. And reduces the cost of all Cat Form abilities by 40% and increases maximum energy by 50, and it lasts 30 seconds. So it's just a super buffed and longer lasting version of Berserk. That's a really nice ability to have as well. Tier 90, we've got Sabertooth. Ferocious Bite deals 20% increased damage and always refreshes the duration Rip. So one thing to note about these abilities, right? So you have Rip, which you want to keep up on your target at all times at 5 combo points. When you get the target under 25% health, Ferocious Bite refreshes the duration of your Rip. So Feral's got a little bit of an execute mechanic in the way these two spenders interact. Sabertooth extends that to the entirety of the fight and gives Ferocious Bite 20% increased damage. This dramatically simplifies the rotation, and for the couple of expansions that it's been around, has as a consequence been the weakest talent on the tier. But that, you know, that's a fair trade-off, right? Because you get a much simpler rotation. You're not worried about keeping Rip up, you're not worried about balancing your combo points. You just have this ability, you know, you just use Bite for the entire fight after you get that first Rip up. Brutal Slash is an AoE ability that replaces Swipe and does okay damage now. It's not as crazy strong as it has been in Legion, but it's still there. And then we've got Savage Roar, where Sabretooth reduces the complexity of the rotation for Feral, Savage Roar increases it quite a bit. So you get 12 seconds for one combo point, and then an additional 6 seconds per combo point. And what it does is increase your damage by 15%. This is a buff on you that you have to maintain, but you do have to spend combo points to maintain it. So this will get you less overall ferocious bites, but everything that you do will deal more damage. So this row is going to depend on tuning, and then Brutal Slash is there for burst AoE. Hopefully Brutal Slash and Savage Roar end up being relatively close to each other, with Savage Roar maybe being slightly ahead and Sabretooth being enough behind that it's not tempting to take. Because honestly, if you take Sabretooth, the rotation for Feral is just really, really boring, right? It becomes get a 5-point rip, maintain rake, and then shred, 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 bite, shred, 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 bite, shred, shred, bite, shred, 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 bite. That's all it is. It's just really, it loses the bit of engaging gameplay that it has, in my opinion, as someone who's enjoyed Feral a lot in the past. So hopefully one of these two talents will be ideal. I like Brutal Slash because Feral has, until this talent was implemented, never had strong burst AoE, and I really like being able to take that for various situations, but we'll see what the tuning ends up looking like. Tier 100, we've got Moment of Clarity, which causes your Omen of Clarity to trigger 50% more often. It can accumulate up to 2 charges, so you don't have to use it right away for fear of wasting a charge of it, and increases the damage of your next your next Shred, Thrash, or Brutal Slash by 15%, and it increases your maximum energy by 30. We've got Blood Talons. So now there's a lot of potential added complexity to the spec in the talent tree, right? So if you're taking, let's say, Lunar Inspiration and Jagged Wounds and Savage Roar, the spec becomes a lot more complex to execute because you're juggling more balls, and Jagged Wounds is going to make your bleeds last less time, so you're going to have to spend more combo points more quickly on keeping Rip up. You're going to want to maintain your other bleeds. Blood Talons adds to that even further. Now, we have a passive ability as Feral, right, that we talked about, that allows you to have instant regrowths, which for some reason I do not have on my bar. I think it's because I have a macro on live when I transferred my druid over. Anyway, we have a passive that gives us instant regrowths, and Blood Talons, when you cast Regrowth or Entangling Roots, causes your next 2 melee abilities to deal 25% increased damage for their full duration. So if you can keep that up on your bleeds and then get some extra charges on bites and shreds, this is a really strong talent to have. If you take a bunch of those talents that I just mentioned that add to the complexity of the spec, what you do is you give yourself a very high skill cap for Feral, but it turns into a very high risk, high reward type rotation and play out, where if you execute everything correctly and well, you're going to do really strong damage, pending tuning, of course. Hopefully, if you execute everything perfectly, your damage is going to be through the roof. But if you make a couple of mistakes, that house of cards is going to come crashing down and your DPS is going to go straight to the bottom. So you do have some choice in the talent tree as Feral. Let's actually talk about our last talent here. Feral Frenzy. This is the replacement for our artifact ability. You unleash a Furious Frenzy, dealing some physical damage directly, and then a 6-second bleed, and it awards 5 combo points. So the artifact ability only awards 3. The talent that replaces it gives you a full 5 combo points. So you've got some options between how complex or how simple you want to make the spec feel, and hopefully the tuning is such that if you take the harder talents, you're going to have, more room for error, of course, but you could be rewarded with much higher damage for it. So let's just take a look with the talents that I've taken at how the basic rotation is going to work, right? So we're Proud. We're going to sneak up behind this dummy, and we're going to open with a Rake, and then we're going to Shred and get a Brutal Slash in, get our Rip up, and then we'll pop our CDs and get a bite up, we'll use our Feral Frenzy talent here for those 5 combo points and get another bite in. Need to refresh Rake. And you can see now this is of course with our cooldowns up, so everything's going to flow a little bit faster. But the rotation is, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's certainly got enough complexity to be satisfying. And there's some depth there. And this isn't even the most complex version of the spec of the talents that we can choose. So yeah, I hope you guys like this video. I really like Feral, honestly. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. It was an okay spec for me in Legion. Certainly not my favorite, but I really like the way it's shaping up. And that actually is making Druid a surprisingly solid contender for me, which I didn't expect to happen before I started previewing these specs. But we'll see how that all plays out. I've got a decision to make sometime before the next video in the series comes out. And until that video, you guys have a good day. You guys have a good time. And we'll see you then. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.